Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We are back again, and we are talking about one of our favorite topics, which is sales. And today we're going to discuss the psychology of sales, and particularly the psychology of numbers in sales and how we adjust our pricing to get the best result, basically. Let's talk about sales. I love sales.
Yeah. Well, you also love numbers. Yeah. So this is like right up our jam. Yeah, there's so many different things that we could actually kind of discuss underneath this umbrella. But one thing that I want to start with is let's start with the basic, understanding your pricing structure and kind of for your pricing period, because a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand their pricing, but understanding your pricing structure as well as your return on investment and your cost of value, all of these different things is really going to help give you the proper baseline and foundations to be able to make the choices in how to have the best psychology of sales and still make a profit. So many times, Amanda and I go into working with clients, especially those that have some kind of product, and they're either breaking even or losing money or barely making any money. They think they're making all this money, but they're not when they factor everything else in. So before we even jump into some of the points we want to discuss today about the psychology of sales is understand your numbers, do a basic Excel sheet, cost analysis of this is exactly how much it costs in product, in services, in labor, in shipping, in taxes, all of that, so that way your wiggle room to be able to price it accordingly.
I'm kind of smiling over here because I don't know for our listeners who has ever watched any television show, but one that comes to mind is Parks and Recreation. There's this scene where he talks about the break-evens and it's super fun to do the break-even. It is super fun to do the break-even. And I know that sounds super geeky, but finding out what your break-even price is fun for me anyway, because I think, and I made this mistake for years. The idea that you have this number in your head, okay, if I paid $10 for it and I'm charging 20, then I have this great profit margin. No, you don't, because you didn't factor in the tax. You didn't factor in the shipping. You didn't factor in discounts that you did. You didn't factor in your time, your effort, all the things that come into it. You didn't pay yourself. And so when you look at the actual amount that you end up making, it's so tiny, minusculely tiny that you don't realize how much you're actually losing ultimately, not just in sweat equity, but in actual real dollars. And so when we talk about understanding your numbers, we do really mean it from a very basic standpoint. This isn't a hard, difficult mathematical equation. It's literally thinking about everything that comes into play when it comes to doing your numbers. How much did it actually cost? Not just in the cost of that particular a product, but in all the things that come with it. Again, taxes, shipping, your cost and time, your effort, your energy, paying yourself, paying your employees, paying the credit card processing fee, all those things trickle down. And that can really make a huge effect on what your bottom line profit is, because, and I know that Lynn has had this issue many times with clients, not personally, and maybe even personally in her former years, but understanding that you can do all that math and realize that you're actually losing money with every single sale. And that hurts in a really real, raw way. It hurts to realize that you're losing money on every single sale, even though you thought you had this huge profit margin. And when you actually do the numbers, it doesn't work out well. So we want to talk a little bit about avoiding that scenario, because we want you to make money. Nobody got into business, unless you're a charity, You didn't get into business to do charity work. Okay.
Charity, not all are like, they make money. In fact, they make a lot of money.
I have worked for charities. You make money as a charity because you have to. That's how you get things done.
Absolutely. Money does make the world go round.
Digress.
I better tell you. Okay. So some points around the psychology of sales. After you understand your baseline, now you can make an educated move to be strategic. So one of my favorite is perceived value. Perceived value means that you're showing them the value of the product or service. And you can do this multiple ways, but one of the ways that Amanda and I actually just did it was, and we do it often in our business, is when we're launching a program, we're going to show all the different price points at its cost, or at its charge, like what we would charge, all the different price points of all the things that you're getting inclusive. So we can chalk it up to, the perceived value is $15,000, but you're getting it for just $19.99 type of thing. So that perception of like, but it has to be palatable. So it has to be perceived value in your potential customer's eyes, not necessarily in your eyes. So it's also the way you word it and different things of that nature, but perceived value helps play a huge role in converting. Now, another aspect to that is the return on investment that they're going to receive. So instead of selling them benefits and features, you're actually going to paint the picture of what problem, like Amanda said, what problem that you're solving with this. And so that's also painting the perceived value kind of aspect of psychology of sales. There's a few different like facets to this one.
Absolutely. And perceived value is important for all the reasons that Lynn mentioned, but ultimately, when you're trying to sell something, the language you use can also be affecting how people perceive that value. And yes, it can be as high scale as the elite language you use for a high value item versus a lower end item. But even using things such as for only the low price of blah, 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 even if it isn't a low price considering, but putting that perceived language into the customer's brain of it's only this much, or it's, for the very low life, or wait, there's more. Like there's lots of things that people say that gives you that perceived idea. That language can implant in your brain from a psychology perspective, can give you the idea that you are getting value, even if it's not this huge value. I'm not saying that you want to dupe people. That's not what we're saying here. But the way you say something has an effect on whether or not people perceive value in it, even if it's the exact same price. By saying something, oh, it's $20, or saying like it's only $19.99, it's 1 cent difference. But the way you say it makes a big difference in how your audience perceives it. So I know it's an extreme case, but just that one little change in inflection and saying like, oh, it's $20. Like, oh man, it's $20. Like, I don't know if you could afford it, but it's $20. Or saying, oh, it's only $19.99. Like anybody can afford that. This is such a great deal. It's the same price, basically 1 cent difference, but the way you say it makes a big difference. So the language you're using, that price point you're using, the perceived value that you are inferring or suggesting makes a huge difference in how your audience reads that sale.
100%. I want to add, you actually, in that you mentioned two other points that I know we're going to cover, but I want to kind of flow into the emotional side, because the way words are powerful, and you want to make sure that you're speaking in your potential prospect pool's language, not in your language. And so not language as in Italian, English, Thai, but in the way that they would speak. So if you're dealing with really highly educated, very upper class individuals, there's a different language that they typically use than somebody who's from the streets. Like, let's be honest, like for real. That's why I don't really get along with those high class people. Don't really relate. Anyway, not saying I'm from the streets, but if you know, you know. Anywho, moving along is it also evokes an emotion and they feel a part of it. So it's not putting the little red flags. So emotion, using emotional emotion language or things to trigger emotion language, even in the perceived value kind of aspect, is going to help people buy on emotion. And that's especially important during holiday seasons, right? But anytime, like it's super important at all times, using the emotional cues. And I'll never forget when I went to a speaking event, and I wasn't a speaker, but it was a big conference. And the whole time, and essentially I was going to see how they work the front of the stage. It was when I was first, I've used this story a few different times, but there's different aspects to it, that why I share it. But my task was to watch them at the front of the stage and how they operated the room and how they sold the product or service, the program that they were going to try to convert the people in. There was probably 500 people in the room, maybe more, I don't know. But the people from the stage were selling it from a scarcity point of view. The emotions that they were pulling on was scarcity, fear. That is not my type of selling. And I remember having this conversation with my girlfriend, who was my coach at the time. I was like, these are not my people. And we were talking it through, and it dawned on me as like, okay, that means that the audience that would be sold in this manner are not my people, at least not yet. Because if they need to be sold on that scarcity way, I'm not their person, because they're going to be living more in victim mode, typically more in fear, more in scarcity themselves. And that's just not going to be my people. So that emotional, the psychology of using emotions to trigger that sales aspect and that conversion, like them to actually buy, is going to play a huge part in it.
And, speaking of emotions, and I know I wrote about this in both the first and second book, particularly in our second book, about the emotion behind purchasing, that people buy with emotion and justify with logic. So when it comes to pricing from a psychology perspective around emotion, and this is a generalization, I will acknowledge that, but round numbers tend to work best in emotional purchases.
Yep.
And what I mean by a round number is, $10, 20, 5,000, like a round number, versus like 24.38. Like putting the actual value of something at what you consider is like the tax number, or like, this is the number, it's actually valued at 24.78. That's such a weird number. If it's an emotional purchase, they're more likely to buy if it's a round number. So if you're looking to price things and you're at that weird kind of in the middle number, it's best to round up or always round up. Don't round down. Don't round down. Don't lose money.
Never
folks.
round down.
Don't round down. Round up within reason, but even still, like, rounding up is going to get you a more of emotional purchase. However, I will say that within that emotional purchases, and this again, it's a little bit nuanced in the psychology, and I say this because I took many a course and seminar on the psychology of pricing. You're also going to get a lot of positive feedback on shifting the left number. So instead of being like $3.60, it's $2 and, or it's $3.59. Like, just shift it over by 1 penny. It's the difference between $20 and $19.99. That slightly lower decimal point, even if it's only 1 cent, 2 cent, 10 cents, 9s and 7s work really well in the psychology of selling. People just perceive it like $19.99 just sounds better in someone's psychology than $20. And I know that it's so, like, when you think of it from a standard normal person, like, that sounds so dumb, like it's 1 cent difference. But I will tell you 1,000 times over, I will absolutely sell something that is $29.99 more than I will sell something that's $30. And even though that's not a round number, it's the idea of shifting the decimal point to change the perceived value. Now, again, there's a difference between a high-end sell, like if I'm selling a car or a house, like say I'm selling a house for a very cheap house at this point for $300,000. Someone's going to be like, oh, it's $300,000. It seems a little strange to me that it's such a round number because it's such a large investment. Now, if instead I said it was $312,638, you're actually more likely to sell at that number, because the value at a higher number, people are more willing to spend a higher amount, and the round number becomes suspicious and they think that you're inflating the number. So I know that sounds a bit weird, but when you're at a higher value, when you are selling something that's at a higher price point, it's easier to sell it at a more
A fluffier price.
a fluffier price, or like a less round number, because people, again, they're not looking for the round number. They're looking for more perceived value. And they're like, oh, well, it costs $312,000 because that's what it's worth, versus rounding it off to 320,000. It's going to seem inflated for no reason. What's wrong with it? Yeah. So knowing the psychology around your audience, because when you're selling to someone who's buying at a price point of a much higher price point than a lower price point, it's going to change a little bit of your psychology around it. So knowing that difference is going to be a bit of a fine line for some people, but ultimately, when it comes down to your pricing, you want to know the psychology behind your specific demographic.
Yeah.
Because selling something at $5 is very different than selling something at $50,000.
Yeah. That is heuristic. Is that how you say it? I always say that word wrong, but price heuristic, where it's you higher price, better value. Like it's kind of like the keeping up with the Joneses mentality type of thing as well, that you can get away from, or get away with. One thing I do want to mention here, because we know we have an international audience, is know your own cultural psychology of numbers. In some cultures, 4 is not a good number. So you don't want to have 4s in your number. 3s are lucky numbers. So 7s or whatever. So make sure that you know your own audience psychology and demographic, so you can make the tweaks, because it absolutely will help you also with pricing psychology and strategy.
And I would also say reduce the amount of numbers. So when you're looking at your marketing and advertising, instead of putting something if it's, for instance, let's say it's $100, instead of saying 100, 100.00, take off the 0.00. Nobody needs to see the decimal point, because it just subconsciously makes them think it's costing more. That's why $99 works better, so much better than $100. It's just one extra place marker. So if you can take out that 0.00, that comma, just take it out. If it's not needed, take it out, because that extra number is going to make them think it's larger, even if it's not. Because looking at $100 or $100.00, it's the same number, but let me tell you, from a marketing and advertising standpoint, it makes a huge difference in what converts to the actual sale.
Absolutely. Another thing that is effective are price decoys. And so a lot of times what you'll do is you'll offer, and this can go into the perceived value as well, but let's say you have 2 products and services or whatnot that are the same. And then you could do a price decoy that's about the same amount of price, but less value, or a little bit less, but they're getting like dirt cheap. So you can kind of bump them into the next tier. That's why a lot of people do like the 3 offers in a pricing structure and a pitching structure, especially in service-based industries, because the majority of the people will go for the middle tier. When you offer 2, it really depends on how you lay that out to be able to get them to the upper tier. Otherwise, they'll always buy the bottom line. Again, that is somewhat market specific, but it's also like pitching specific and kind of your layout specific. But overall generalization, that's why the whole decoy effect is most people aren't going to buy that bottom tier, because you don't get as much. You want to build the most value in that middle tier if you have 3. So you can kind of push them there. And the jumps from 1 to 2, if you have 3 of them, the jump from 1 to 2 might be a little bit bigger than from 2 to 3. So 2 to 3 will be less more of a jump usually, and they get a little bit more, but you're trying to hyper focus in on these 2 as your go-to, like where you want people to buy.
And that also comes down into like price anchoring. So if you've ever heard about the concept of price anchoring, so people tend to rely very heavily on the initial piece of information they get. So if they see that your introductory offer is $1,000 or 10,000 baht or whatever, and then they see that your next point is only 99, they're going to see this. They're like, oh my God, that's such a huge deal. Of course I'm going to get that, because their perception is that the best deal you have is the higher price point. And so anything below that you're mentioning becomes a deal versus just like the cheaper option. Whereas if you start with the lowest price offering is $5, everything else seems inflated. So knowing that if you anchor your audience in, this is a higher price, this is the item I actually want you to buy at this price. If they end up buying something cheaper, it becomes more of an economical value-based item that the other item is, it's exposing you to a different part that you might be offering, but also it's giving a better understanding of how they're seeing the anchor of your pricing. So I almost always lead with my higher offer and then downsell versus starting with my lowest offer and trying to upsell people, because it gives, again, you're leading into a different audience. You want to lead with the idea that your value is higher, that you're worth that much, and you have more economical options, but ultimately you're anchoring them with the idea that this is my normal standard price of X. And we also have YZ available here at this price point, but you want to start higher rather than starting at your very lowest and hoping people will give you more.
Yeah, it's easier to take things off the table and walk them down than it is to add things and walk them up. So 100%. Absolutely love that. Just a couple other things that help with pricing that kind of fall underneath, or not kind of, but they fall underneath the pricing psychology of pricing, is like the idea of bundling or subscriptions are really a great, because people want, again, this goes back to perceived value, that even those that are wealthy, especially those that are wealthy too, a lot of them are very frugal. So they want to feel like they're getting a deal. Frugal at certain things, not frugal at other things. But they want to feel like they're getting a deal. They want to feel like they're a part of something. And actually the subscription part in the pricing of psychology, there's a couple of different things to that I feel is really of value. Again, we could probably talk a whole hour on that just in itself, but one is subscription. The psychology side is they're already paying every month for a low amount, right? So even with coaching clients where I could take all of the money up front, I prefer a monthly because it's easier to convert them into a longer term because they're used to paying that out every single month versus getting another chunk of money. They feel a part of something. So how many of you have subscriptions that you feel a part of, like the Netflix club or the this club or the that club, and you feel a little bit more in alignment, but also because you're so used to paying every month, you sometimes forget about it and don't use it. We don't want people not using our products and services, but it just becomes an extension of, it just becomes a part of. So the subscription, the psychology behind, and again, I'm very superficial, like in how deep we can go with that, the subscription side, the psychology base, but it definitely adds to they feel more of a valued customer because they have something that maybe not everybody can have. They get priority. Like there's all these different things. So it helps with client retention, subscription-based models. You tend to have them longer. It's really interesting, but also like, it also is the agreement of the subscription. And but that's a whole other thing, but still, like subscription base and bundling again is like where you get all of these, like buy this. And then, I buy a lot of things from iHerb because I live in Thailand and I want to get like certain products. And even like with iHerb, they said, okay, you bought this, but a lot of people buy this, and this. Amazon does it. Okay, you bought this. A lot of people who bought this also looked at this or also bought this, right? That's the bundling aspect. That's kind of the upsell, the add-on sell. So there's a whole thing around that. Oh, I want to be like other people, but also, oh, you're hearing my needs, right? When the bundling kind of aspect happens, people think you're hearing their needs.
Yes. And I know we've mentioned this before, but I wanted to circle back to it because I think it's so important that as a business owner, you need to understand not only your product and or service, but also your demographic. And what I mean by that is one of the best psychological, I'll call it a trick, that I use and have used for 25 years in pricing is when you know your audience and what you are selling, you can really work on emphasizing price or product. For cheaper products, you can emphasize the price. This is such a great deal. You show the price And then you reveal the details around the product. And this is emphasizing that economic value of the product before they really worry about what the product is itself. But when you're selling a luxury item or a very high-end item, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to present the item and the lifestyle and the solution that it offers, and then make it an extra effort that they have to go through in order to see the price. So it really, you're emphasizing and you're prioritizing for the buyer the quality of the product over the value of the product, because at that price point and that demographic, it's not really about the price. It's about what that product is and what it means and what it will do for you and what it will create for you. So again, that concept of price over product, value over luxury, it changes. And it really is important that you know and really truly understand the demographic that you're working with. Like, who is your target audience and what is it you're selling? And one of the great examples of this is there was the one I think of right now that I worked in PR for a long time. So one of them is this luxury cat litter. Okay. So it was a cat litter. Literally, cats are pooping on this rock. Okay. It's cat litter. Okay. And the client wanted to reduce the price because they're like, oh, well, all of our competitors are at this price and we're not selling enough. So we should lower our prices to try to increase the selling. So they're trying to get more clients by lowering the price. Instead, what ended up happening in this company is they doubled the price of their cat litter because it was a luxury cat. And if you really care about your cat, and you have a luxury cat, you'll pay this extra price for this luxury cat litter that changes colors based on the type of urine they're having. And then you'll know more about your cat and you'll care more about your cat and you are a better cat owner. And they like tripled their stock in like a year. It was ridiculous how fast they were able to change because they shifted the perspective of it. They don't want cheaper. They don't want more. They want select people who are willing to pay double, triple the price on this specialty luxury cat product.
Absolutely.
And it was a very specific niche. But again, they understood their target market. They weren't going for the people who were looking for the cheapest cat litter. They were going for people who are looking for luxury cat litter.
Absolutely.
And that's a thing, folks. That's a thing. So if you think that you can't sell your thing, luxury cat litter is a thing.
Absolutely. And I will say, and this is not to bag on the luxury industry, but I can guarantee, like, there's been a lot lately, especially lately, I've seen a lot of like, where the luxury industry is being called out about like how they're selling that bag for $10,000, but it only costs them $500 to make. And that same manufacturer makes things at the $20 marker, right? So like, it's just because a little bit of, but it's the brand name and it's how you present yourself. And so that's all about the psychology. I mean, it's marketing, the psychology of marketing as well, but it's also about the psychology of pricing. And so I love that example, because come on, cat litter. Anyway, we can go on and on and on. I think that we are at time. We should probably wrap this up. We hope that you got some nuggets out of this.
Ultimately, when it comes down to psychology, as it comes out with any psychology, it's about getting into the head of your people. In a very nice, like in a
not
wonderful,
manipulative in a bad way.
Manipulation, not in a bad way. No, it's not. I'm just ultimately, psychology is about looking into things, like really diving deep into the psyche of your audience. And that's what knowing your target market is. So it's not manipulative. It's not creepy. It's knowing your people. So when it comes to really thinking about the psychology of the sales and how you price things, it's about knowing your target market and what they need and what they expect and what they're looking for. And then you can tailor your offers and really speak to your target market. So it's psychology of sales. It doesn't have to be scary. It's really ultimately about knowing your target market, about knowing who you're talking to, who you're selling to, who you're trying to provide solutions for. And it's going to be okay.
It will be okay. All right. So share this, subscribe, give us a comment. We love to hear from our audience. What stood out to you? What other aspects of the psychology of pricing? Again, we could have spoken about so many different things
for years.
Yes. But what has stood out to you and what questions you have for us? Go ahead and hit us up in the comments, wherever it is. Follow us on Instagram, hit us up there. We love to talk about this. Like, this is like our jam.
Yes. So if you have any questions, make sure you are following, subscribing, and then ask those questions because we are happy to talk sales all day long. Grab the book and then we'll talk some more about it.
Yeah. And share this with entrepreneurs and small business owners that you know, because even if we know our numbers, we don't check our numbers enough and we don't analyze like the market trends. We didn't even talk about like market trends and the sensitivity of that and different things. Like there's so many different things, but you definitely are always wanting to keep one hand on your pricing to understand where you're at, the pulse of it, the pulse in the industry, et cetera. So share this with somebody or many people that you know that could use just kind of a refresher, a reminder to kind of check what their pricing psychology is and what they're doing about it.
All right. Until next time, get after it.
Get after it. All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.